Whether you're a diehard sports fan, a hopeless romantic, or a comedy aficionado, the Xfinity 10G network was made for streaming it all. Worry less about buffering when streaming your favorite shows, movies, or live sports, and enjoy a better way to watch. Xfinity gives you a reliable connection for streaming, plus all the entertainment you love all in one place. Fear not, because now you can finally sit back, relax, and stream your favorite entertainment and sports like never before with the Xfinity 10G network.
Hello, Duke fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. I am your host, as always, Jason Evans. Thank you so much for joining me, and I am joined by one of my usual partners in crime, Sam Klein. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good. It is 6 a.m. here in Denver. There's a light covering of snow on the ground that I can see out the window. So pretty standard Colorado weather. And hey, did you know that Duke is up to number one in the Ken Pomeroy rankings?
Yes. We've been number one most of the season. We dropped out for a little bit, but just last night we put a little bit of I don't want to call it a beat down, but we definitely beat the Florida Gators fairly soundly. They were pretty highly regarded by Ken Pomeroy, and that has boosted us back to the top spot. Also joining us this week, I am sad to say that our usual partner in crime, Donald Wine, is not around. He is on vacation, or for some reason he's in the Caribbean or Central America or something like that. I'm not sure. He may be trying to take over Cuba for all I know. But we are joined by Jordan Brenner, who writes for Bleacher Report. He used to be a college hoops writer until very, very recently for a writer and editor, I should say, for ESPN The Magazine. This is a guy who's written numerous articles about Duke basketball, and I guess you'd say is kind of close to the program, certainly knows some folks connected to the program. Hey, Jordan, thanks a lot for waking up early and joining us this morning.
I would never miss an opportunity to talk to the great Jason Evans for any length of time at any time of day.
Oh, you flatter me so. Thank you, sir. We should also point out that Jordan was at the Duke-Florida game just last night. So, again, the Blue Devils beat the Florida Gators 84-74. It was a game in which many people say it was the coming out party for Jason Tatum. But even with Tatum scoring 22 points, he did not overshadow Luke Kennard and Amile Jefferson, who both turned in another incredible, great game in many, many phases of the game. Jordan, I'll start with you. Give me your impressions from being there, from seeing what it was like in the Garden as the Blue Devils took care of Florida.
Yeah, it's somewhat remarkable on a team that I think we all thought the hallmark would be great balance and depth, especially as the year wore on, to watch it was sort of a three-man offensive show reminiscent of the 2010 title team almost, right? You had three guys basically scoring all the points. But Amile and Kennard especially just continue to be so impressive with each game. And I do hope Duke fans are really appreciating what Amile Jefferson is doing. When a guy like that just improves year in and year out and is able to finish off with a senior or a fifth year like this, it's just that that kind of harkens back to the old days of college basketball and really enjoying watching someone grow within a program. And I hope you all are enjoying what you're seeing in him. He's become a really good player.
It's a mix. This Duke team is really showing itself to be the great mix of the different types of college basketball players that you can have. I mean, fourth and fifth year seniors in Jones and Jefferson who do all the fundamental things so well, and then you get guys who aren't yet seniors but who are clearly really experienced players in Allen and Kennard, and now we're mixing in some of the freshmen, especially Jason Tatum. Sam, let me throw it over to you and ask, who was the most impressive player on the floor last night for the Blue Devils?
I would go with Jefferson, but you could talk me into any of those three. Tatum obviously didn't have quite as good of a game as Kennard or Jefferson did, but Tatum's also coming off however many weeks of injury now he's been gone for, with his tune-up game against Maine. So I thought that he was really impressive, especially in the second half. But I would give it to Jefferson. I feel like on both ends of the court, he's really asserted himself. One of the things that I wanted to get into later, but I guess I'll mention now, when we talked at the beginning of the season about who's going to lead the team in various statistical categories. Amile Jefferson got a little bit of love, I think, from us for leading the team in blocks. He's got 22 already on the season, and his previous career high was 26. So he's been much more forceful on the defensive end. I think in years past we noted that he was good at guarding lots of different positions, but that there wasn't like one thing on defense he was really strong at. I think he's gotten much stronger on defending the post. He really shut down Florida's bigs yesterday. There were a few possessions where he'd be one-on-one against a guy, and the guy would start to back him down, but then Amile would just would make himself big, and the Florida player wouldn't have anywhere to go with the ball, and Amile would either block his shot or force him to kick it back out, sort of out of rhythm. And so I think for that reason, Jefferson, because he can do it at both ends of the court, was really the most impressive player last night.
Jordan, let me throw this one over to you. So last night, Duke really only used 6 guys. Chase Jeter got 1 minute. Marcus Bolden got 2 minutes. And Coach K, well known for having a short bench, and even when he has talented players over there, being reluctant to play them. Was this? Do you think this is a harbinger of what's to come over the rest of the season, or is it still a matter of he's trying to work guys in different kinds of ways and places and figuring out combinations because he's still dealing with guys coming back from injury or not yet come back from injury?
It's sort of both. I have a fairly long-winded answer for you on that.
That's okay. Be long-winded. Talk for a while.
So the last piece I wrote ESPN before I left to go on Bleacher Report was actually was a Duke story. I was down in Durham in October, took in a couple practices, and then wrote about the team for the Mag season preview, and I really focused on the size and depth of the team. But part of what I mentioned in the story is obviously, as you mentioned, Coach K does tend to like to get down to 7, 8 guys. With most teams, there have been exceptions in the past, and obviously sort of has a preference for maybe playing small and switching screens, and you could see the possibility was there with this team for 2 reasons. One, obviously the bigs are young and haven't been healthy, and 2, he had 6 really good perimeter guys, and anyone who thought Luke Kennard before the season was going to get lost in the shuffle somehow was out of their mind. And he's always going to find a way for guys who can play, and all these perimeter guys can play. So, I talked with people before the season about the idea that maybe the patience with the bigs won't be as long, and that maybe, he even, I was down there before Bolden was hurt, before Tatum was hurt, and obviously I think the thought was Giles would be back sooner than he's been. But even then, Coach K was talking about even being able to slide Amile to the 5 and Tatum to the 4 and switch off screens. So it's not like we didn't see any of this coming. Look, Bolden, when he's healthier and the rust is gone, is going to play. You're not going to see 2 minutes, 2 fouls from him. That's not going to happen. He was really impressive when I was down there in Durham. He's got good feet, good hands, really good touch around the hoop with both hands, and he is something. With all due respect to Amile Jefferson's newfound shot blocking prowess, he is a legit rim protector. So it's just going to take time with him. Jeter is the big question mark for me because he had a really good summer and fall. Was playing really well in practice.
How do they find time for him, though? There's just
that's the question.
Yeah, I don't know how, other than blowouts, and I think there are going to be some blowouts. But continue. Sorry, I just don't know how they find time for Jeter this season.
Well, the bigger thing is not how do you find time for him if you have a healthy Bolden and Giles. The concerning thing is how are you not able to find time for him now, right? If he were playing as well as I saw him this fall, and as well as they thought he was playing in practice and he was really going toe-to-toe with Bolden every day, he wouldn't be getting 1 minute in a game like this. I think pretty clearly he hasn't played as well in games so far this year, and he looks like a kid who maybe the confidence sort of wavers when things start to not go so well. But, yeah, I would be concerned that there's not the trust right now to have him on the court in these situations, and I think probably that injury set him back a little bit. So I wouldn't be worried about Bolden being in the rotation. What I'd be worried about is how and if Giles can adjust to playing again after being out a year, and whether Jeter can do anything to sort of turn this thing around. Otherwise, I think you'll be seeing probably more of that Jefferson at the 5, Tatum at the 4 lineup than maybe you counted on before the season, which isn't necessarily a terrible thing because it does give you some defensive flexibility, and I think you saw how nasty Tatum can be in the pinch post, elbow type of stuff.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, one of the big takeaways from this game was Tatum's ability to play the 4 against a Florida team that had some beef, has some length on the inside, and was certainly willing to go up there and attack the glass. And Tatum, I thought, had a really nice game, playing the 4 and keeping them off the glass. He had 8 rebounds in 29 minutes, every single one of them defensive rebounds. And he's not really in position to get offensive rebounds, but I thought he did a really nice job playing the 4, and I can see why Kay would fall in love with that. And when you have him and Jefferson on the floor together with the other wing players, everyone talked about the fact that Duke doesn't have a point guard, and we don't have a real point guard, but we're basically immune to pressure because we've got so many other guys who can handle the ball. And when Jefferson and Tatum are in the game, you can't press this Duke team. You can't put pressure on them because we've got 5 guys who can all handle the ball really nicely. Jordan, I'm surprised about what you said about Jeter because I thought he had a really nice game against Michigan State. He played 20-plus minutes against, a pretty good Michigan State front line, held his own. So you feel like it's a confidence thing with him? I feel like I just haven't seen it. I'm yet to see it click for him. He has flashes. He has moments. But I can see why Coach K didn't play him a lot in what he thought would be a really competitive game.
Yeah, I just think it's look, again, it's one thing watching guys in practice, but the Chase Jeter I saw kind of carried himself with strength and with, again, confidence in those field practices I saw has not been what I've seen on the court this year. Even in games where he played decently well, like the Michigan State game, I saw a guy this fall who could be a really good dive guy on the pick and roll, who was catching the ball high and dunking in traffic, and who was, a presence on the defensive boards and could be a shot blocker. I haven't quite seen that same comfort on the floor from him. But to get back to the other point you just made really quick, I always thought the lack of a true point guard was always a red herring for this team. Like you said, there's a lot of guys who can handle the ball. Tatum has some point forward skills, and I always thought Luke Kennard was just really good with the ball in his hands. I was telling people last year that, even back to last year, that I think it would have been, they ran so much ball screen stuff with Grayson Allen, but I kind of would have liked to have seen them do more with Kennard and, put Grayson Allen on the weak side where he could then attack a closeout because Kennard is so clever with the ball. So I've always found that to be sort of one of the less valid potential criticisms of this team, and I think you saw the way the ball was moving and humming in the second half. There were some sequences last night were just beautiful basketball where guys were just catching, making a quick decision, moving the ball, and you end up with dunks and layups. You don't need a point guard, and you got 5 guys who can play ball and dribble and pass to do that, and they've got that, especially when they go small.
Well, you end up with dunks, layups, and really quick. You end up with dunks, layups, and open 3-pointers for Luke Kennard. We haven't mentioned Grayson Allen yet, and Grayson Allen had, to me, about as good of a only score 6 points when you're a big scorer game as he possibly could have. He had 8 assists, and he probably assisted on at least 4 of Luke Kennard's 5 3-pointers. Sam, go ahead. What were you going to add?
Oh, I was gonna go back to Jason Tatum for a second because we had talked about how well he's been, or how he might be the best guy to be playing the 4 on this team. And I think that in years past, Jordan's whole piece was about Duke's depth, especially in the front court. In years past, we'd get a recruit like Tatum and be like, oh, he's a great Duke 4. He's going to be like Jabari Parker or Grant Hill, similar size. I think can play all over the court like that. And on this team, we came into the season thinking, oh, well, Tatum's going to have to play the 3 because there's too many guys in the post. So it's almost like we're reverting back to what we think of Duke basketball working as, which is really like one true post player and the rest of the guys around him. And Tatum just happening to be the biggest guy who can go inside and get rebounds. So he is really a Duke 4. more so than he's a 3, even though we wanted to pigeonhole him into this role. I guess I wanted to follow up with you about Grayson Allen and just agree that, he has struggled shooting the ball, but otherwise seems like he's adjusting well. You don't see him upset about, at least on the court, about the fact that Kennard has really taken over his role as the lead guard on this team and has scored most of the points. So credit to Grayson Allen. I do wonder if maybe he regrets not leaving for the draft this year, just because he's being overshadowed by other players and isn't having maybe the best version of himself out there. But to his credit, has been a real team player about it and appears to be rolling along right with these guys as they're beating good teams.
Well, to be fair, the guy is clearly hurt too. I mean,
right.
I don't know how many times Coach K has to mention this toe injury before people recognize and just watch him for 5 minutes. He's not himself. He's a terrific shooter, as my friend Jay Billis likes to point out in podcasts. But the guy, sort of made his mark going to the basket, and that explosiveness, that final step to elevate and get to the rim and score in traffic, that's not there right now. It's not hard to see. So I think he's doing what he can with what he has right now. But if this toe injury is really a problem and it's the type of thing that would respond to rest, I'd consider shutting him down for a couple of weeks now that you've got Tatum, got Bolden back, and getting him well for ACC season, because I think you'd rather have a peak Grayson Allen for the games that count than one who's dealing with this lingering toe injury all year. But again, I am very far from a doctor, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it is the type of thing that's going to respond to a couple of weeks rest. But I'd be curious to know if that's the case.
And he doesn't strike me as the sort of player that is going to respond kindly to being told to rest unless he's absolutely told he has to, right?
Yeah, but I don't think there's a problem in the Duke program with Coach K telling you what to do. So
no. Just that Grayson Allen would rather be, if nothing else, he'd rather just be driving aggressively to the rim than doing just about anything else on the court or for the program. So
sure.
No, I'm not worried about him being a rogue player. Just that his basketball preferences don't line up with sitting on the bench.
Yeah, I'd say that's fairly common in most players.
Hey, Jordan, really quick, do you feel like Grayson Allen has so far this season hurt his NBA stock, or is there a real understanding of the circumstances he's been under from an injury standpoint?
I haven't spoken to any scouts or GMs since the preseason when I was writing the preseason piece, because it's just so early to be, I'm not really checking up on anyone's stock. I would think that if this injury is sort of as significant as they're saying, most pro people would understand that and just would want to see him then when he's healthy again, and just to sort of cross-check and confirm that this is just sort of injury related. Here's the thing. In general, the idea of draft stocks fluctuating so rapidly based on a couple games, it doesn't happen. NBA people are smarter than that. They go off very large samples of information. So nobody, even honestly, even if you weren't hurt and you were just playing like this, no one would be like, oh, well, that dropped him from 20 to 40 on my board. Like, that's just not the way the league works. They're actually far better at making decisions than most people give them credit for. And, they're not making rash, impulsive choices based on a small sample set of games.
Wait, are you implying that they actually pay attention as much as we do? I'm shocked.
I know, it's amazing, right?
Yeah, right. So I just want to add a couple other really quick things about Florida, and then unless you guys have something else to say, we can move back in time to some of the other games that I just want to briefly touch on, especially in that Michigan State game. But ESPN had a great stat last night that I want to remind everybody of. They point out that Luke Kennard, Amile Jefferson, and Jason Tatum combined for 75 points, and that all three of them scored more than 22 points. The last time three Duke players scored 22 points in a game, January 20th of 2001, when Jason Williams, Carlos Boozer, and Shane Battier all did it, which is pretty cool. And then I also noticed something pretty interesting. ESPN has these little player shot graphs, little graphs of where everyone took their shots, what they made, what they missed, and where it came from. Last night's game, they had Amile Jefferson taking one shot. One of his 14 shots was taken outside of the paint, and he missed it. I thought Jefferson was amazing at the angles that he chose and his ability to get off his shot even when playing against bigger guys. It is amazing to see what he's turned into. But I love the fact that he took one shot outside the lane, and that's one of the 3 shots that he missed the entire game. Did you guys have anything else on Florida you want to bring in, Sam? Anything else here, or should we move back to Michigan State?
Nope, I think we covered it.
I'll say
good.
one thing that you guys as Duke fans, I think the one thing you might want to be concerned about going forward a little bit is overall team defense, and I think it might be a byproduct of going small. We've sort of seen the importance of rim protection in general, and I think maybe the one area where I sort of dismiss the importance of a true point guard on offense, but there isn't necessarily that one guy, Matt Jones being asked to do it a lot, that one guy built to guard small point guards. And I could see that being a problem going forward. So just something to sort of keep an eye on.
I've noted that. I've noted that, because in these games against like Florida, Duke wins by 10 points. Michigan State, Duke wins by, it was about 10 points. So they're not pulling away from these teams, like other elite teams. If they're playing teams that are like bottom top 25 level, you might expect them to win by larger margins of victory or to put the game away earlier. And Duke hasn't really done that. And I think that's because of the defense, right? They're scoring plenty, and it shows up in the KenPom rankings as well. But that they don't lock down individual guys maybe as well as they could. I think that might improve when you get guys healthier and maybe they have a little bit more energy to play on the defensive end. Just because for now it hasn't really bitten them yet.
Right, and maybe we can return to this a little bit later, but it's that overall team defense I think would be maybe my biggest concern about this team going forward.
Although I know we sound like we're going to move on, but Jordan, you brought up something that I do want to talk about. I thought there were times last night against Florida where Duke's team defense looked awesome. It looked really good, especially like the start of the second half when Duke's really stretched out the lead a little bit, and that was to me where you got the sense that Florida really doesn't have a chance. Florida just doesn't have a chance in this game. Florida, it felt to me like they scored most of their points off of kind of hero shots, guys going one-on-one, and they got hot. Allen got hot from the outside, not Grayson Allen, the Allen on Florida. But I thought Duke at times played really good team defense, again, especially early in that second half. Did you not see that?
In spurts maybe, but I'm talking about consistent high-level defense. We're making possessions a grind, and I think teams are getting to the rim pretty easily still. If you just sort of look at where the ball goes and what sort of resistance is there, I just don't think it's not like a high-level outfit yet. And quite frankly, it hasn't been for several years. Duke's staple had for so long was pressure defense and creating offense, but this team has been for the last 5-6 years. It's been about incredibly high level offense and defense that times can get by and at times killed the season, with the sort of exception of the last month or two of the championship season in 2015. So I don't know. A few possessions here and there against Florida notwithstanding, I think there are still issues that may or may not just be fixed by healthy Bolden, healthy Giles in the lineup, and freshmen becoming comfortable in the system. But again, it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's probably a function of how long these guys are in the Duke program. It takes time to become a good team defensive unit, and you don't get a lot of time with guys who are one and done, the way so many guys are at Duke in recent years. So let's officially move back in time. I also want to talk about the Michigan State game about a week ago or so. Duke won 78-69. Like Sam said, it was about a 10-point victory. And Sam, I'll start with you on this one. Grayson Allen had 24. Luke Kennard had 20. Amile Jefferson had 17 and 13. And yet everyone says the star of the game, and I kind of agree, was Mr. Jones. Talk to me about your impressions.
That was going to be my one point that I wanted everybody to remember, was how much Matt Jones frustrated Miles Bridges, the star freshman for Michigan State. Even though Bridges is a few inches taller than Jones, Jones was on him most of the game, and as Jordan pointed out, he's probably the best perimeter defender on this team. And Bridges, you could see those flashes of athleticism. He had the one putback dunk that was just ferocious, but otherwise didn't seem really to get into a rhythm against Duke. And that's mostly credited to Jones. And he's going to have games like this where he's not going to score any points, or he's going to score 2 points. But he's going to be really important in making sure the ball gets to the right guys, because he gets, a fair number of assists for a guy that never shoots, or who doesn't shoot very well. And then on the other side of the ball, he plays defense really well, and is able, when the matchup works, to really get after individual players like Bridges. And that was the key to Duke winning this game, especially because early in the game it was pretty back and forth. Duke didn't pull away until partway through the second half. They weren't shooting the ball that well, so keeping Michigan State down was just as important as trying to get the shots up on the offensive side.
Coach K, after the game, said of Matt Jones, he had a spectacular 2-point performance. And I read a great stat. I mean, this is, you guys know me, I love my statistics. This is a great stat. In the first 12 minutes of that game, with Matt Jones shadowing Bridges everywhere he went, Bridges touched the ball on offense twice. We're talking about a 17.5 point per game scorer, the best player on Michigan State, their star.
Who's one and done.
Yeah. In the first 12 minutes of the game, he touched the ball twice. And one of the times he touched it was because he got a steal on the defensive end, and he was able to take the ball up the length of the floor. And you could see he was visibly frustrated that his teammates were unable to get him the ball, but they were unable to get him the ball because Matt Jones seemed to know where Bridges was going before Bridges even got there. It really was very, very impressive. Jordan, what were your impressions of that Michigan State game?
Similar to what you guys were saying, it still wasn't a vintage effort by any means, but again, it was sort of like the last of the games they had to grind out without any help from these talented freshmen, and sure, I got used to seeing them play that way. I think you're right. The unheralded things Matt Jones does really kind of stood out in this game. I think you guys mentioned earlier that Chase Jeter actually gave him 21 minutes and some sort of a presence in that game. I think you'd have concerns about a Duke team that maybe that was the 6-man Duke team going forward. But I think, with all of those early games, it was like, okay, how can they, eke out a win this way, because this is not ultimately what it's going to look like going forward. And I think that team figured out how to beat teams with what they had, and I'm sure no one wants to go back to that lineup either now that they've got some of their talented guys back.
Oh yeah, well it's fun. It's fun to watch Jason Tatum, but yeah, I think we should reflect on the incredible effort it took to get to 7-1. We're now 9-1, but 7-1 is where we stood when we really only had 6 guys. I mean, in that Michigan State game, Jones and Kennard both played 40 minutes. Hopefully, we won't have to resort to that ever again this season. I think that affects some of the defense. The fact that these guys are playing huge, heavy minutes and have to carry the load by themselves has affected their ability to exert effort at both ends of the floor, because if they get tired, they get exhausted, there's no one on the bench to come in for them, really. So Michigan State is the kind of team that is usually really, really physical with you, usually just pounds you to death on the boards. Michigan State only got 8 offensive rebounds against Duke. And I just continue to be incredibly impressed with the effort that these guys put forth, considering that there weren't a lot of reinforcements there to help them out. Amile Jefferson, you just can't say enough about Amile Jefferson. He had 5 offensive rebounds against Michigan State. I just thought, there were plenty of times where he was the best player on the floor. He was the impact player on the floor. And it's not something that I ever expected that we would see out of Amile Jefferson.
And to your point about defense and fatigue, the other big thing is when you only are playing 6 guys, players know they can't afford to foul. I talked to Matt Jones about that actually before the season. And last year's team was not very good defensively. And he sort of admitted that you don't want to think that way, but when you may not be quite as aggressive or risky or physical, especially early in a game, knowing that there's no one else to go to if you get in foul trouble or if you get tired. That even though you tell yourself not to, it's sort of human nature to hold back a little bit because they are aware of circumstances of the team. So I do think you're right that in general having more guys and at least the knowledge that there's somebody behind you should enable guys to sort of go more all out on defense and ultimately should allow Coach K to basically say, you're not playing defense at the level I'm expecting, you're coming out of the game. He hasn't had that option the past couple of years.
So I want to quickly, there was a game in between Michigan State and Florida. We played the Maine Black Bears, a really interesting game because it was the first time we got to see Jason Tatum and Marcus Bolden in Duke uniforms playing in a regular season game. They, of course, suited up in the blue-white game earlier this year. So it was also, I think, the 130th consecutive win for Duke at Cameron against non-conference opponents, which is just insane. We haven't lost a non-conference game at home since the year 2000. There are kids who, not this coming year, but like in another year, who will be applying and going to Duke University, who the last time Duke lost, they weren't even born yet. It's just insane how good we are at Cameron. Sam, was there any takeaways you had from the Maine game? What was it like to finally see Tatum and Bolden? Pretty nice to finally have some help, huh?
I mean, it was great to see Tatum and Bolden. I was excited to see Jack White for 10 minutes. No, Maine was a horribly overmatched opponent, and it was good that Coach K had that game to get Tatum. Tatum got a lot of minutes. He played 20 minutes in that game. Bolden a little less, and it does seem from the minutes that they played against Florida that Bolden might be a little farther away from being ready to contribute. But it was good to see them both out on the court, showing a little bit of what they can do. Bolden actually had a nice game in limited minutes, but yeah, I think that was the big takeaway from the Maine game was just that we got to see those guys play a little bit, and that felt good. And we had the Florida game, and then now we're going to enter a stretch of games where there aren't as many, the teams aren't quite as good until we get to ACC play. So hopefully it means there's more opportunities for them to try out different lineups and to get Bolden and Tatum and hopefully Giles now integrated back into the rotation so we can see a semblance of what this team is supposed to look like ahead of starting conference play.
Well, speaking of different lineups, some people have noted that for 4 full minutes against Maine, Duke sent the following lineup onto the floor. Are you guys ready for this one? Amile Jefferson, Chase Jeter, Javin DeLaurier, Jack White, and Antonio Vrankovic. There isn't a guard unless you think maybe Jack White's a guard. I think he's really more of a small forward. But Coach K essentially sent out like 2 or 3 forwards and 2 centers for 4 minutes, and they actually outscored Maine. And I think Jefferson kind of ran.
How tall was the tallest Maine player?
Yeah, probably maybe Jack White's size.
Yeah,
I think Jefferson played the point guard during that for that lineup. I love it. It was it was a good game to get things to get some guys integrated and to rest up some. We haven't even mentioned Luke Kennard had 35 points in that game. Kid's ridiculous.
He's pretty good at basketball.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I love? The left, the ambidextrousness, the fact that he can shoot with his left or his right. And I think lefty shooters like him, when he gets around the basket and he puts out that really quick left-handed shot, I think you're so used to playing against right-handed guys, it's like you don't see it coming. And so he's able to get it off a little bit easier because it's not like he's elevating above anybody when he takes that shot in the lane. He's just sort of, I'll put a little head fake on you and I'll spin around a little bit and then I'll put the ball up with my left hand, and he makes that thing remarkably often. Really, really, it's tremendously impressive. Anything else on Maine, or should we move on to other stuff?
Let's look ahead.
Let's look ahead. Sam, we have UNLV coming up this weekend. This is not Jerry Tarkanian's UNLV, is it?
No, it's Jordan, am I saying this right? Is it Marvin Menzies? Is that his name?
I believe so.
Yeah. It's Marvin Menzies' UNLV team. And no, they're not a whole lot like Jerry Tarkanian's UNLV. The UNLV program has had a little bit of turbulence the last year. They fired Dave Rice a little less than a year ago, installed an interim coach. Then they hired Chris Beard, who was the head coach of that Arkansas Little Rock team that was so exciting in the tournament back in March. And then less than a month after they hired Chris Beard, he left to go take another job. So they had to hire Marvin Menzies. So now they're on their fourth coach in under a year, or fourth coach in, it took all of about 5 months to have all these guys in there. And under Dave Rice, UNLV's success was mostly due to having really high-level NBA prospects who came in and would only play 1 or 2 years for them. Going back, they had Anthony Bennett a few years ago. They had Christian Wood and Rashad Vaughn in the 2015 team, and Wood was also on the team in 14. And then last year they had Steven Zimmerman, who's now in the league. UNLV doesn't have any of those top-level recruits anymore. There are no RSCI top 100 guys on this team, and it shows because they are 5-3. They've lost games to Alabama and TCU and Bobby Hurley's Arizona State squad, and their only wins are against directional schools and schools in the California public school system. So no wins that are not Berkeley or UCLA. So no wins over major teams yet. They're 185th in KenPom, and they run a lot of guys. They have kind of a deep bench. But it doesn't seem to be paying off for them. So their best player is Jalen Poyser. He's a 6'4" point guard, sophomore. He's averaging over 17 points a game, and close to 4 assists a game. So he's talented enough to be the best player on this team. And then they've got a good big man in Dwayne Morgan, who's 6'8", and he scores 10 points a game and gets almost 8 rebounds a game. I don't expect Duke to have a ton of issues with this UNLV team. The game is in Las Vegas at the new, I believe, is it the Oracle Arena? At the new arena in Las Vegas.
It's T-Mobile, right?
Yeah, T-Mobile Arena.
It's the arena that they're going to use for the hockey team. So they're playing this game there, and then I think they're also playing Kentucky. UNC is going to be there the following weekend. So they're trying to get major events in there, but it's not UNLV's normal home court. They play in the Mack Center on campus, which isn't that far away, but is a smaller, more intimate venue. This is a big, NBA, NHL sized arena that they're going to be playing in. Certainly an atmosphere that Duke is used to playing in, having played a few games so far this year at Madison Square Garden and in years past. In like the United Center and places like that. So I don't expect Duke to be overwhelmed by that. Although I don't know how long it's been since Duke had to play games out in the Western time zone. So there is going to be a little bit of adjustment perhaps for this team because normally they stay home and when they play on the road they're playing in New York or they're playing in other ACC schools. And I would just note as a personal thing, I really wanted to go to this game because it's one of the most convenient Duke games that I'll probably ever get to see, but couldn't make it happen this weekend, unfortunately. Have either of you guys watched any of UNLV this year and have any comments about them?
I have not, but I did watch Arizona State last night. They look
They're not
terrible,
very good.
and Arizona State beat UNLV by 24 points. So,
right. And most recently.
There's that.
So,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen UNLV play at all. Sometimes if there's an opponent coming up who I think really can challenge Duke, I'll try to make an effort to see a game. And I think UNLV is not a team that can challenge Duke at this point. I would expect, look, if Arizona State beat them by 24, you would expect Duke to spank them pretty hard, because Arizona State's not that good a club. And UNLV has absolutely no impressive results, and they're in the 180s in Pomeroy because they're not good. So I didn't bother. UNLV, the name sounds great, but I don't think they're much more than a name at this point.
Well, and it is a little bit of a weird scheduling spot for Duke because they were in New York, obviously, this week. They're going to presumably come home to Durham for a couple of days, then fly out to Las Vegas, and then the week after is final exams. So it's a little bit of a weird spot on the schedule. But yeah, I don't expect them to have a ton of trouble, even having to go on the road. So I think that's all I had on UNLV.
So earlier we mentioned that Jordan Brenner was with ESPN The Magazine for a while and is now with Bleacher Report, and he's someone who's written numerous articles about Duke basketball. I want to take a couple minutes on the podcast now to really dig into Jordan's mind. Jordan, you've been a fan of college hoops, but also a member of the media who got to get close to some programs, especially to the Duke program. What kind of stuff did you see and learn that would surprise the fans?
Just covering the games, or
yeah, or anything that we might not expect as fans that you happen to come across, things that you're allowed to say.
I mean, gosh, I've been doing this a while now, so that the stuff that probably surprised me 10 years ago, I just don't even pay attention to anymore. But I think if you're not around a college program closely, you sort of don't realize how professionally it runs, and how just, there's oftentimes a lot, in terms of the way, the time put into this stuff, and the scouting that goes on for the assistant coaches, and the amount of time the players are spending related to the sport, whether they're getting, our restrictions in our practice notwithstanding, the amount of time they're spending getting treatment for injuries, and in the weight room, and putting in their own time shooting and stuff. It really is a full-time job, and it's remarkable that, they're almost expected to be college students with the demand of this. The most time I ever spent with a program was actually with Michigan. I did a story on them playing 2 huge games in 4 days a couple of years ago. The year they ended up making it to the national title game against Louisville, and I was everywhere with them. Team meals, team plane, team hotel in Indiana, and it's just this close group and of every, and the ops guys and the training staff, and it's just this sort of like traveling party of 20 to 30 when you include managers and stuff, and they're just so all locked in, and each knowing their role. It just functions like a machine, and it really is an incredibly time consuming, labor intensive enterprise.
Does it make you jaded? Does it make you does it bother you that these kids are not getting paid, that this is supposedly about student athletes, and it sounds to me like you're describing pros?
So I go back and forth on this, and I go to different extremes. I actually, honestly, and I've been toying with writing something about this for a while, and I'm still sort of figuring out the right way to do it and source it. There's a part of me that feels like none of this belongs in the university system, that we sort of have this really strange culture that's unlike anywhere else in the world, that for some reason decided to combine academics and athletics when the two things really have nothing to do with one another. And if you look at some studies that have been done over the years, athletes tend to especially at selective schools like a Duke or host of other top schools in the country, athletes tend to get greater admission breaks than any other subset. They perform worse at school than any other group. They tend to be less involved in the university after they leave and less involved with the rest of the university while they're there. And there are also studies done that show there's really no correlation between a team's success and alumni giving. So when you start to take those things out, and when you start to take those things out, you start to wonder why we're doing this at all and why the highest paid state employee in virtually every state is a college football or basketball coach. And what message are we sending to people, to young people, about what matters in our society? So that's like half my brain is there. The other half is, this is a free market. We have chosen as a society to prioritize these things, and we are spending tons of money to watch these games, these guys are coming in, and whether you want to call them student athletes first or entertainers, they're providing a service, and that service extends beyond the cost of tuition and should be compensated in some way. Of course, then you run into, we could go on this forever, right? You run into Title IX problems. Like, I've literally heard no one explain to me how it could be done with Title IX, that you would pay revenue-generating sports and not everyone else. And it's a really slippery slope. I don't think the NCAA, I'm no fan of the NCAA, but I just don't know what else to do short of, in basketball, really developing the D-League to a legit minor league system, so then guys have the choice between, getting paid or pursuing an education, but getting paid real money. It's such a tough issue. So that's a really long answer as to why I haven't written this yet, because, for all the reporting I can do, for all the people I've talked to and the studies I just cited, ultimately I don't know either way is the right answer. So, I'm curious what you guys think on the subject.
I'll tell you where I am, which is, if I was designing it from scratch, I would say that there should be a minor league system the way we have in baseball for both football and basketball, and that minor league system would be as successful, as interesting, with fans as invested in it, and make as much money as college football and college basketball do. But that's me waving a magic wand, and that's not reality. Jason Tatum, one of the reasons Jason Tatum came to Duke was to hone his basketball skills, but it was also to be part of the Duke brand and to begin to develop the Jason Tatum brand. And part of getting ready for the NBA is playing in a professional program like Duke. And there are plenty of other programs. I'm not saying Duke's the only one. I don't think that playing in the D League prepares you in quite the same way. And I kind of like the fact that there are some limits on these guys, that they aren't immediately expected to be a full-time professional basketball player. I know that, I know there aren't a lot of limits, and I know, Jordan, like you pointed out, there are limits on practice, but they spend a heck of a lot of time in the training room. They're expected to spend time outside of practice working on their game and doing other things like that. But at least there's a little bit of a limit on them. And I don't know that there's any other system that makes sense. And the money's huge. There's billions and billions tens of billions of dollars in college football and college basketball. That's not going to go away.
No, that's right. And I had a colleague the other day too. Sorry to cut you off, but just you reminded me of something. I was having a discussion at work with a colleague who, he was actually making the point, and let's put away any let's not feign surprise here, guys, and let's talk college football, right? So it's not hitting anything here. Guys are getting paid all over the place. Okay, let's be real about this. All right, and his point was, he kind of likes that system because it's going around some of the tricky issues I said we had to navigate, and there is sort of a market value based system that if such and such a program thinks you're worth this, then you're getting this amount of money, and the such and such a program thinks you're worth that, and you're getting worth that amount of money. And the guys who really have a future playing this professionally or earning their worth, and the other guys can still get their college degree. Now, I was largely disagreeing with him, but it was an interesting defense of sort of the underground market. We'll put it that way. And again, like anyone who thinks that like, I don't want to say every program, but if anyone who thinks that like top players at a lot of places in top sports aren't getting paid, you're just oblivious. Like, and it's just, unfortunately, it's just an impossible thing to prove, which is why, you know, I could feel the follow-up question, well, why isn't this reported on more often? It's so hard to prove, and then I would also say that the people in best position to report on this are local media. But if you're at the, you know, let's make up a fake school. If you're at, you know, West Kansas State Tech, you know, are you going to, and you have to, and you know, you're in that community, are you going to burn all access to the program and piss off everyone who lives there? It basically takes a lot of journalistic integrity to go do that, and a lot of places don't necessarily have that right now.
Let's a little shout out to Dan Kane right now of the Raleigh News and Observer for what he's done at Carolina, and he's had death threats as a result of his investigations.
That's a great point.
Yeah, and by the way, it's worth noting, Dan Kane was not the Carolina beat reporter. He was not a sports reporter. He's an investigative reporter. I agree with you. I think you're 100% right about all this stuff. By the way, really quick story, and then I'll let Sam jump in on this point, and Jordan, maybe then we'll ask you some other questions. This is a great side topic. I didn't anticipate this, and it's been really fun. But when I was at Duke in the mid to late 1980s, I was with lots of the guys in the basketball team. I'm not going to say who told me this story because I don't want him to potentially get in trouble. But a prominent member of the Duke basketball team, a guy who had been a McDonald's All-American, was a very close friend of mine, told me that when he was being recruited, a certain other very big school, Syracuse, I'll go ahead and say Syracuse, what the heck? Syracuse offered him $10,000 to come play there. Now, this was in the mid-'80s. The amount of money in college basketball was probably a fraction, maybe a tenth of what the money is now. Inflation, everything else. If he was offered $10,000 by Syracuse, he ended up coming to Duke. He said the money didn't matter to him. He wanted a different experience than what he would have gotten at Syracuse. And he was very happy and very successful at Duke. But if he was offered $10,000 in 1987, I can't imagine what these guys are being offered today to play big-time college basketball, big-time college football. And I'm not saying that Duke does the offering. They might. I don't know. I don't have personal knowledge of it. But Jordan, I bet that story doesn't surprise you one bit.
Well, especially because you've told it to me before.
Right.
But,
you know who the player I'm talking about. So
I do, and you pretty much narrowed it down for anyone who wants to do a little investigating too. But really, Jason, I'm not going to tell you anything. But he was there when I was there, and he was recruited by this school too, and we had classes together on Tuesday and Thursday. No, but his name rhymes. Anyway, yeah, I'm not going there. But look, I will say this: like, not everyone pays. Not everyone has to. Because there's a certain threshold of a program where you're so successful that there are other reasons why a kid would want to come play for you other than to get paid money. And not every recruit is looking to get money. It's not necessarily, it's not a 100% thing. And so, are there places, elite programs, and I'm purposely leaving out names here because I don't want anyone to think I'm talking about anyone in particular. But are there places that can do it without going that route? Yeah. But are there places that do go that route? Yeah. So, it's sort of up to, in some ways, your own personal moral code in terms of what you think is right and what you think is wrong, and how much you think sort of the way the NCAA runs things justifies going around it, and how much you think, I think most people believe, for instance, that players should be able to use their likeness. I don't think that's a particularly controversial topic among fans, among media, that you should be able to make money off your name. So the question is, if you think that's just patently unfair, they can't do that, then does it bother you less if a booster is letting him a car for free, or is finding a way to funnel money into the family or something like that, because they're getting screwed on one end. So who are they hurting on the other? I really don't want to pass judgment on that front, and sort of would ask you guys and your listeners to kind of come to those conclusions on your own. But it really is a fascinating sort of culture and world where this exists. And it's, again, I just come back to, it's all grown out of this very strange marriage between athletics and academics, two things that just probably, again, if we were, like you said, Jason, if we were going back to scratch and waving the magic wand, two things that probably never belonged together in the first place, but now have come to sort of exist as odd bedfellows.
Jordan, so I want to wrap up our conversation with you about your career as a college basketball writer and editor, and a career that continues. I want to talk about giant killers, because this was the thing you really did at ESPN much of the time while you were there. You looked for teams that might surprise folks by knocking off one of the big giants, like a Duke. Tell me about that, and what do you look for in an upset? Because, to be honest, I think Duke's likely to be favored in 99.9% of their games going forward, if not 100%.
So this was it's kind of a funny story how it started. I was our NBA editor at the magazine before the magazine moved to Bristol in 2011. So, but I always sort of dabbled in college basketball too. And one point, one of the other editors came up to me and was like, "Hey, Brenner, figure out a way to predict who gets upset in the tournament." And what I tell people always my response was, "Yeah, if I could do that, I'd be in Vegas right now, not in this newsroom." But I'm not I'm numerate, but I'm not someone who can run his own regression analysis and stuff like that. So I sort of had the right idea and didn't really necessarily know the best way to execute it, which was to sort of look for patterns among teams that had already pulled off upset. So I took this very rudimentary math and kind of looked for some commonalities, and came up with this very basic list of criteria that tended to produce upsets. And then, lo and behold, the system sort of targeted George Mason in 2006 as a potential giant killer, and that sort of Final Four run kind of sold the project. And from there, it was just about, first it was bringing on Peter Keating, my buddy, and one of our columnists who actually can run a regression analysis, and putting better math involved. And now we actually use a team of professors. Well, I can't say we anymore because I've left ESPN and my baby is gone. But we had used a team of professors at Furman who did all this crazy advanced math that I can't even do. But I would interpret the results, and basically they showed the big lesson of giant killers, that teams that play a high-risk, high-reward style tend to pull off more upsets. And the theory should make sense to anyone, because in the tournament, it doesn't matter if you lose by a point or 30. You're not trying to impress anyone. You want to win the game or you're done. So doing things like shooting lots of threes, playing pressure defense and trying to force steals, going hard to the offensive glass and generating extra possessions, those things are extremely important to generating upsets. And then, top teams that don't do those things well, that don't guard the arc, that don't take care of their defensive glass, that don't generate extra possessions of their own, leave themselves more vulnerable, because it's a pretty tried and true thing in basketball, or any sport really. The more the more chances you have, the more possessions, the less efficient you have to be. And the fewer individual skirmishes, so that's why a slow pace is favored for an upset. The fewer individual skirmishes an underdog has to win, the better their chances are as well. So it's been a really fun sort of 10-year project, and we ended up getting our own TV special a couple years ago, where it was me and Peter and Seth Greenberg and Shane Battier on the set, and it really sort of took off. And it's probably the thing that and the Bristol cafeteria are probably the things I miss the most about being with ESPN, but it's in very capable hands with Peter going forward.
Well, it's really cool. So what you're saying is, look out for the teams that shoot a ton of threes and crash the boards like crazy. Teams that it looks like, oh yeah, you might beat them by 30, or it might be a close game.
Yeah, turnovers, offensive rebounds, threes, those are the biggest is a variance in the game. So yeah, I mean, there'll be plenty written on that in the GK blog going forward. But if you're starting to study teams that look like they could be, Cinderellas a few months from now, those are some good things to look at. And if you want to find some top teams that look vulnerable, like Georgetown always had a profile that looked this way, and sure enough, they've been just destroyed by giant killers repeatedly in the tournament. It's a good thing to look at. The interesting thing is Duke traditionally is projected as very historically safe, which is why the Mercer and Lehigh games, which I know you're really happy with me to bring up, were really upsets because they just didn't, even our model didn't rate them as remotely high chances of happening. So, Duke tends to play a style that, particularly in shooting threes and guarding the arc and winning the turnover battle, tends to make them safe against underdogs. So it was those games were very surprising, not just to fans, but to spreadsheets as well.
Well, I'd hope that you would come here and explain to me that it wasn't possible for Duke to get upset, but I'm really disappointed in you, man.
Yes, well, you've seen it, sadly, quite a bit recently.
I have. Okay, so we're going to move on to our player of the week, and this will encompass the Michigan State, Maine, and Florida games. Sam, I will start with you. Who is your choice for player of the week? And you really only have two choices.
Okay, I am going to take one of those choices, which is Amile Jefferson. Averaged a double-double over the last week and a half. Went 18 for 26 in aggregate against Michigan State and Florida, the two really good teams that we played. And as I mentioned before, watching his season blocks record as he's about to beat it, which is really exciting. So Amile Jefferson, who's done a lot of work all over the court, really seems to be holding this team together, and also appears like he can handle the ball a little bit, which has been a real boon for the Duke team on offense.
And you didn't even mention the fact that he anchors our defense. You mentioned the blocks, but I mean, he's the defensive
nice things to say about him.
Yes. He is the great defensive communicator. Hey, Jordan, do you have someone that you think, as my phone rings, do you have someone that you think should be Duke's player of the week?
Yeah, I'm going to do the co-players of the week with Kennard and Jefferson. There's just no way I'm deciding between the two of them. They've both been so impressive all season, really, but especially of late. And you can now see the way it's kind of fitting, too, because last night, the big difference was the two-man stuff they were running, the ball screen stuff, and how well they seem to understand each other offensively. I'm not choosing between the two. They're both playing at an extremely high level.
You, sir, are a coward.
The biggest, but you know that.
By the way, I'm going to take Luke Kennard as my player of the week. In the past two games, he's 22 of 32 on field goals. That's 69% field goal shooting. He is 9 of 16 on three-pointers. That's 56% on three-pointers. And he's averaging merely 27 points per game. And by the way, he's grabbing rebounds and playing pretty good defense, positioning himself really nicely in defense, and playing 40 minutes a game. To me, it's not a tough decision to pick Luke Kennard. And Jordan, I don't know how much you listen to our podcast. Sam, who listens to every single one of them because he's with me on every single one of them, knows. I think I've picked Luke Kennard every single player of the week, haven't I? I think Kennard, I'm now 3 for 3. Yes. Yeah. And Jordan, by the way, I'll tell you a prediction that I made early last year. I said that Luke Kennard would be the next 2,000-point career scorer at Duke, which, as you know, is not an easy thing to do. It means you've got to be a big scorer, and you got to stay there probably for 4 years. What do you think, man? Do you think Kennard going to come out after this year? I was sure he would be a 4-year player at Duke, but he's starting to look like an NBA player, isn't he?
Yeah, I don't think that's what I mean to come out. And I actually wrote the same thing in my my preseason story, that he could, if he stays all 4 years, to score 2,000 points and someone else, I think when I was in Durham, I can't remember whether it was a coach or someone with with the staff or some had said that same thing to me. So I never got a sense that he was a potential draft guy this year. But I guess if he keeps playing like this, it's something you have to think about. Again, I haven't spoken to any pro people about him yet, but I'm curious to make some phone calls later.
Yeah, but hey, make sure you let me know. Let me know how that goes.
Yeah.
By the way,
I'll just conference you in.
Thank you. That'd be perfect. By the way, to me, the sort of funny thing about Jefferson and Kennard playing as well as they have lately and playing as well as they have thus far this season, before the injuries, before the season started, when you sort of talked about who are the guys who are going to play a lot for Duke and things like that, and you looked at, here are the top 6, top 7, maybe even top 8 guys, Kennard and Jefferson would have been at the sort of bottom of that list. And yet they have elevated themselves to the top of it thus far, which is, just goes to show you can never tell what's going to happen. Although we're waiting. We still haven't seen a single second of Harry Giles, and Jason Tatum just showed up for the first time last night, and oh my God, he looked unstoppable at times. Anyway, okay, so we will move on to the very end to our parting shots. Sam, I will start with you. Give us your parting shot as we wrap things up here.
Sure. I went to a Duke alumni holiday party the other night at the Colorado Governor's Mansion, which was really lovely. And I just wanted to say that I had a great time. I met one podcast listener and talked to a few other folks who I know through the whole Duke basketball community. So it was just a really, really lovely time. So shout out to, I don't think anybody who put on the event listens to this show, but if they do, shout out to y'all for doing a great job.
Jordan, do you have a parting shot, or you said you weren't sure? You weren't even sure what the heck parting shot meant.
My parting shot is just I am so thrilled that I could join you, Jason, on this podcast and get up nice and early and get to work a little bit late just to spend this time with you. So thank you for the opportunity, and I do hope you'll have me back sometime.
We would love to. You've provided some excellent insight, sir. Thank you very much for that. You are so kind. Usually when you and I talk, it's over Google Chat. So this was a nice change. My parting shot is a tip of the cap to Klay Thompson of the Golden State Warriors. He did something truly, truly remarkable. He scored 60 points in 29 minutes the other day. He is the first player in NBA history to get 60 plus points and play less than 30 minutes of a basketball game. But there were a couple other stats I want to just point out. Again, I've said this before. You guys know me. I'm a stat head. I love stats. Klay Thompson dribbled the ball. Klay Thompson dribbled the ball a total of 11 times, 11 dribbles to get his 21 field goals. He also had the ball in his hands a total of 88.4 seconds in the entire game. Some guy at Sports View or something like that came up with that. He had the ball for 88 seconds in the game, and he scored 60 points. Klay Thompson is the ultimate catch and shoot ball player in the NBA. And I just thought those stats were unbelievable. The fact that he scored 60 points on 11 dribbles and 88 seconds. It's crazy. That's absolutely insane.
Totally nuts.
Yeah. So my parting shot is a tip of the cap to Klay Thompson and to the Golden State Warriors for they're playing pretty good basketball right now. So that's all we got for you this time on the DBR podcast. Again, a big thanks to Jordan Brenner of Bleacher Report, formerly of ESPN The Magazine, for joining us. My buddy Sam Klein out there in Denver, Colorado, who got up really nice and early to join us on this podcast. Duke has UNLV coming up this weekend. I don't think we'll do another podcast after UNLV. We'll probably wait a little bit. The team's about to go on a bit of an exam and a Christmas break, and we'll find time in there someplace to get back to you guys, to you folks, all 8 of you who are listening out there, and have another podcast. But for Sam and Jordan, I am Jason Evans. Thanks a lot for joining us, folks. And Duke Band, it's your turn. Take us home.